Pokemon has to be one of the most important pillars of my gaming experience. I grew up during its explosive phenomenon in the late 90s and early 2000s. I watched all the films, all the anime series, of course I played the games, and there's a lot of memorable and great games that have come from that franchise, which I still return to every few years or so. Recently, I've been replaying all the mainline games with my girlfriend as she didn't experience the Pokemon craze back in the day. After playing up to Sun and Moon, in my opinion, ever since Generation 5, so Pokemon Black and White, the Pokemon mainline series hasn't attempted to innovate enough or taken big enough risks to really push the genre forward. That's not to say it hasn't tried to do anything different since Generation 5. The jump to 3D was a nice touch, Mega Evolutions are quite fun to use, and other random features such as Dex Nav and Super Training are all very useful stuff to have, but I don't feel like all of these things are enough to help Pokemon grow and improve. Why I feel Generation 5 was the last innovative moment in the series is because it took seamlessly small risks that made the game feel fresh and unique among the games that preceded it. Having only Gen 5 Pokemon available until the post-game, making a story with characters / villains that were more complex and interesting. For Pokemon standards, of course, this isn't anything deep or like really philosophical. TMs now have infinite use, hidden abilities as well, and there's like the very nice season mechanic that I thought was really cool. These were all very minor changes, but they were great, unique, and left a great foundation to be built upon in future titles. I felt that these little mechanics alone could have really expanded into something else that could have been used in future Pokemon games. Generation 6 onwards started to feel like Pokemon games that were painted by the numbers. Like, you know what kind of games I'm talking about, like a game that repeats a tried and tested formula from a successful game, so no matter how lazy its design is or how much it lacks innovation, it will do successful purely based on the recognizable formula alone. So take for example Super Mario Bros. 3 in comparison with the new Super Mario Bros. Series on like the Wii and Wii U, or like Ocarina of Time to like other 3D games. Those games are like really successful in their own right, but they do seem to take a very familiar formula from its sort of magnum opus to kind of produce things that are familiar and easy to make. Pokemon X and Y feels way too safe in its execution, where I honestly can't even remember much of that game. The story is super forgettable, its villains are a joke compared to last gens, and it's just so easy that even playing it casually feels non-engaging. The game itself isn't completely terrible. Gameplay wise, it still brings the usual Pokemon style of battle and exploration with nice updated graphics and a new Pokemon type, but that's about it. It's Pokemon by the numbers again, you know. Get your starter, get your Pokedex, fight gyms, beat bad guy, get exclusive legendary, beat the league, roll credits. Nothing special. Pokemon Sun and Moon was the same deal, but way more sleep inducing by just how hard this game held your hand like a naughty child. Like the constant roadblocks stopping you from exploring, and the boring cutscenes that made me feel like I was taking a tour in a museum. I wasn't playing a game, I was on a tour. It's the only Pokemon game that I finished once and never gone back to. Like, not even the Ultra Beast and the Trials were enough to changes to warrant a second playthrough. I can go on listing several different cliches that the series has rinsed and repeat, but what I wanted to do was establish my experience and feelings regarding the series. I don't hate Pokemon. I still like playing Pokemon, but I do feel that there is a lot of potential to be made from the series if it didn't play it so safe. From what we've seen so far, Pokemon Sword and Shield does look like it could be that game. That is like a nice breath of fresh air with its interesting setting, and having it be on the Nintendo Switch rather than the 3DS, and Game Freak really emphasizing the strong sense of change. It has all the ingredients there to really do something completely different. It sounds great, but regardless, I do want to discuss some of my suggestions on how to help improve this series. This is a change in Gen 5 that I honestly think is underrated. Having only the new generation of Pokemon available in the main game is a great way to get familiar with them and encourages you to try different types and different teams. It makes the game stand on its own 2 feet and carry itself without the need of familiar faces from previous generations. Some of my favourite Pokemon come from Gen 5, simply due to the fact of having to get accustomed to them. Gen 6 had some cool Pokemon here and there, especially its starters, but there were way too many previous generation Pokemon that show up here. You even get a Kanto starter during the game. It just feels like they barely gave two shits about any next gen Pokemon. I know they do this to showcase the new evolution, like the new Mega Evolution mechanic, but you seriously couldn't get one Generation 6 Pokemon that you could have done this with. There's hundreds of Pokemon you've made, but you couldn't get one Generation 6 Pokemon to showcase the Mega Evolutions with. They did it with Lucario and they did it with the Gen 1 starters. Like, come on, man. The RPG genre is very multifaceted in its style of play. You have your action RPGs, your JRPGs, tactical RPGs, MMO RPGs, the list goes on. Pokemon has rarely dipped its toes in different styles of RPG. The Pokemon Stadium series and the Mystery Dungeon series are the only notable moments where I can say that Pokemon attempted a different perspective on how the series can play out, and those games were, you know, those games were great. Sure, they're not the cash cows that the mainline series are, but nonetheless, it was a nice alternative to look forward to when you're not playing the mainline games. Especially the Mystery Dungeon series, those were incredibly fun to play. The lore of Pokemon has gotten huge over the years, and honestly I feel like they have the materials to try out amazing things. Let me show you a tweet of me describing what I would feel would make for a great Pokemon game that's not in its usual style of monster raising. Imagine if Pokemon was an isometric dungeon crawler that used battle items as equips, with certain Pokemon being different classes, such as Machoke being a brawler or warrior class, Chansey being a healer or a priest, Alakazam as a wizard, Persian as a thief. Imagine that for a moment, just imagine that. You know, Pokemon turns into like a JRPG, all the battle items from the metagame now become equipment, you travel through a world in the style of like Elder Scrolls, Diablo, Final Fantasy. Gameplay could be turn-based, real-time. Just imagine that though, just imagine. To me, that shit would be so amazing and an exciting change of perspective from the usual formula. If Square Enix back in the day could take something as basic as Mario, a game that's literally about running and jumping, and turn that into a fantastic RPG, then I honestly don't know why Game Freak has not done that already with Pokemon. I don't know if it's just me, but am I the only one who's tired of just being a Pokemon trainer that's expected to collect badges and beat the league all the time? Like, can I be a Pokemon breeder, or even a Team Rocket grunt, or a Pokemon gym leader? Shit, I'll be Togepi for like it. Just let me work towards something that's not Pokemon League driven. The games have flirted with the idea of different roles and goals, like things like Pokemon Contest and like the Underground from like the Pokemon Diamond, Pearl, Platinum games. But I am surprised that the series have never dived in headfirst with making a game that's focused on a role that wasn't about being a Pokemon master. Now, Pokemon Ranger is probably the only game that might have done this. I haven't played it, I've only seen little bits of it from back in the day, but think of all the possibilities that could come from this. Like, the anime alone has so much content that, you know, all these different characters and roles that people do within the Pokemon world, that I'm honestly surprised that Game Freak just doesn't nab like something from the anime and just expand upon it in a game. If they can do that with Pokemon Yellow and take elements from the anime and put it in Pokemon Yellow, then what's stopping them from doing anything else? Once again, let's imagine for a moment. Imagine you got a Pokemon game in the style of Pokemon Colosseum or Pokemon XD Gales of Darkness, but you can choose between 4 characters: Pokemon Master, Pokemon Breeder, Team Rocket Grunt, Contest Contender. Pokemon Master is your standard gym league Pokedex adventure. You always gotta keep that in because that's what people are familiar with most. Pokemon Breeder revolves around you training and breeding Pokemon for nature purposes. So you could be like a part scientist, but part like a nature boy sort of thing. Like, you know, I'll probably expand on that sometime soon, but you know where I'm going. Team Rocket Grunt lets you do villain stuff like stealing Pokemon, causing mischief, you know, just being an absolute like renegade. And a Contest Contender is similar to Pokemon Master, but you earn ribbons through contest and eventually a ribbon cup, you know, straight out the anime. Each character has a story with their own distinct personality, but different events occur throughout that will have your paths cross with different characters such as the Pokemon Master, Breeder, Rocket Brian, etc. Sometimes you might work together, or sometimes you might fight each other, you know, it depends on how the story goes. It kind of feels like an open world adventure game, but it's confided in the area of like a single player with a little bit more story driven. So think of something like, you know, for moviegoers, Pulp Fiction, and how all these stories just like cross each other. Or for like a video game person, think of Sonic Adventure 1 and how all the other characters' stories kind of cross and you kind of meet up with them sooner or later, but just a lot more in depth, if you know what I mean. It doesn't need to be as in depth as anything like Mass Effect story system, but being able to play as different roles in like a massive Pokemon world would be amazing. Despite all my suggestions, it ultimately boils down to simply wanting a new style of Pokemon game to play. This series is sitting on a gold mine of content that can be expanded upon, and it just bewilders me that Game Freak, as much as they have these amazing resources, they have Nintendo backing them, they have a massive franchise as big as like Pokemon, they just don't build something really big. Like, they don't really just go all out. They have so much they could do with the series. And in the same breath, I kind of get it. Change can be a scary thing, especially in any video game series. When people come out and say that they're making changes, it can always either be a good reaction or a very bad reaction. Gamers nowadays can respond very negatively to change, whether or not they think it benefits them or doesn't benefit them. And maybe Game Freak's just very scared of taking that plunge. Maybe they feel that trying to change anything at this point will just lead to direct failure. It could potentially like kill the franchise if they tried to make any changes. As irrational as that sounds, there are countless games, classic games as well, that have shown that change is always a good thing. And there's been many different classic games as well that have come out that have shown that more of the same is the best thing to do. From what Pokemon Sword and Shield has revealed and what people at Game Freak have said, it seems like they want to take a different direction. Honestly, at this point in Pokemon's legacy, there's nothing else to do except try new things. It's one of the biggest gaming franchises of all time and one of the biggest nerd fandoms of all time. It has so much to work with, and it's gotten all the accolades to show for it and all the achievements it's reached and, you know, gathered. It can continue to earn more and grow larger and even stronger than it's ever been before. But all the Pokemon series needs to do to achieve this is evolve.